People who have seen something they could never explain. What was the thing? 14 years old, pretending to sleep at a friend's house and instead walking around the city at around 3 a.m., and suddenly, for about 3 minutes, it's bright as day across the whole city. I could clearly see mountains probably 5 miles away, and then poof, back to dark. There was no obvious source of the light. That was around 35 years ago. Still have no clue what it was. A tree fell in front of us while we were driving, it almost killed us. Moments later, a group of men dressed in nice clothes just happened to have chainsaws in their car, that was black and had black tinted windows. They started cutting up the tree. We quickly turned around and said nope. I tried to tell myself that it was just Mormons, who happened to have chainsaws in the back of their car. I called my mom the other day to see if she still remembers that incident, and she does. I was standing on the seaside walkway with a bunch of other people watching the sunset. A red orb came speeding down the coastline at like 50 to 150 meters altitude. I didn't think much of it until it instantly stopped and speeded back the way it came until it was out of sight. No noise, too low for a plane or helicopter, and wasn't a flare because it was flying fast, stopped instantly, and then flew back the way it came. Several people saw it, but this was before mobile phones with cameras were a mainstream thing. I live outside city limits. There are very few houses near my home and many tall bushes and trees around the house. There is a small mountain at some distance. The nights are very quiet and there are no streetlights, so after dark, the only lights are the lights from my house and the moonlight. There are 2 trees a little far from my house that are standing close to one another. One night, while I was outside my house with a flashlight doing something, I realized there was only one of those trees. I looked around that tree with my flashlight, but there was no sign of the other tree, like it never existed. The next day I went there during daytime to see exactly what happened to the other tree, and they both were there just like I remembered. I looked around them and even climbed on them to see if there is anything strange, but nothing was out of ordinary. A voice sounding like my friend's sister calling out his name from a tree line in a park. Me and my friend were walking home near the middle of the night, both of us heard it. He was called out 3 times. As a kid, on rainy days I would grab my umbrella and jacket and play around in the rain, collecting raindrops. One day, when I was about 11, I was playing outside, in my front yard. I decided to go into the sidewalk to catch a bit more rain. I then looked into the street. It was a foggy rainy day, but I could have sworn I saw someone who looked exactly like me. Me being a kid, I panicked and ran inside for the rest of the rain. I was dumb, so I never really told anyone, because I thought that they wouldn't believe me. One night, years after I had gotten married, I had a vivid and very sad dream about the first boyfriend I ever really loved. We were 15 and 16, broke up about 3 years later because he really got into drugs. I had this dream maybe 9 years after that. I dreamed I was walking down a crowded sidewalk in some big city, and I bumped into him, going the direction I just came from. He was crying and he asked me for help. I can't remember if the dream changed then, or if I woke up, but it was just that little snippet of seeing his face, it was so clear. I still remember how his beautiful blue eyes looked. I don't know why I waited a couple more years to call his mother, and ask about him one day when I recalled that dream for some reason, but I did call her. It turns out he had died in a freak accident around the time I had that dream. He had a car in his garage that he was working on. He had climbed on the hood for some reason, to do something, and he fell, he broke his neck, and it was fatal. Now I'm always sad and a little creeped out every time I think of that dream, probably always will be. I used to be a home health aide for the disabled and the elderly. I stayed overnights to help them get up, use the restroom, change, clean them, and more. I used to take care of a man named Mr. M. We kept a large, old clock alarm that chimed every hour. Every 2 hours we'd roll Mr. M over and change his pads. We recorded everything that happened in a notebook by the clock. It was a usual day until around 2 a.m. I heard the chimes ring twice, wrote down that I was going in, then went in, wrote that I changed his pads, wrote the time I got done, then went back to the kitchen where I sat every night, having my laptop set up to pass the time. About 15 minutes pass, and I hear the clock chime again, 4 times. I look at my computer, thinking the clock was wrong, and no, it was 4 a.m. I look at the notes, no new notes. I write that I'm going in, and I go in to change Mr. M's pads. I walk in, and he looks at me and asks, "Weren't you just in here?" I said yes, then went with changing his pads. I still have no idea what happened to those 2 hours. It was like 2 hours passed in 15 minutes. and 3 a.m. was skipped completely. I was watching a YouTube series at the time, and my video would have ended in that 2 hours. To this day, I have no idea of what the hell happened. When I was at university in my second year, we lived in a terraced house. I have a history of lucid dreams, and had just recently at this time experienced a couple episodes of sleep paralysis. One night I wake up, and I remember staring at the doorway, completely frozen, and seeing the shadows of 2 men there. They were whispering about taking me, and discussing whether I was asleep. I remember hearing, "Go back to sleep." It was completely fuzzy and dark, and I was in that very much blurred reality stage of not being able to tell if I was awake properly or not. I couldn't move at all, chalked it up to sleep paralysis, and went back to sleep. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, except the police knocked on our door that afternoon, and said our neighbor had their house broken into that same night. The real kicker is that, at the time, our front door lock was broken. Anyone could have come in and left without us knowing. To this day, I will truly never know if it was a coincidentally bad day to have a nightmare, or a lucky escape. This incident happened to me when I was 10 years old. My friend and I were cycling. It was around 7 p.m., and it had gotten dark. There was a road where we usually cycled, but it was a dead end. There were bushes on one side and a wall with barbed wires. At the end of the road, there was a residential complex on the right side, and a small route led to the farms. The middle part of the road was all quiet and dark. My friend and I were just chatting and cycling when I heard a sound. I don't remember it well, but it seemed like a little girl weeping. Just as I was about to ask my friend, "Hey, did you hear that?" he shouted, "Run!" When we reached the other side of the road where the residential complex was, I asked him, "What the heck, bro? What happened?" He was shivering in fear, and said he saw a woman in the bushes with a big white eye. When some people appeared on the road, we quickly left. We were shivering with fear, and to this day, we don't know how to explain it. I, 13 at the time, was about to go to bed. I was brushing my teeth in front of my bedroom window, staring into the dark, when I suddenly heard someone screaming outside. I stopped brushing so I could hear it better. Someone was screaming out my name. I sort of froze and kept listening. More voices joined, all screaming my name and laughing loudly. It was kind of like an audience at a sports game. It went on for about 5 minutes. When it stopped, I went downstairs to my parents, to ask them if they'd heard anything. It was impossible not to hear, as it was very loud. They had not heard anything. I assume it was some sort of hallucination. I still feel weird when I'm alone in my room late at night. When I was about 9, me and Mom had to share a bed in a shed with graves scattered around us. We were awakened by a loud thumping sound coming from the flatwood roof. As my conscience regained, I was terrified by how consistent the sound was. It was back and forth, left, right, as if someone was walking. This is impossible, because above the wood was another metal sheet roof. The space is not enough for even a dog to slither in. The steps continued and my mom started shaking and chant some Buddhist prayers. I distinctly remember shouting out loud with the hope it would disappear. It did stop for some seconds every time I shouted, nevertheless kept walking afterwards. After about 10 minutes, it stopped completely, followed by the vibrant sound of wildlife from the nearby pound that I was unable to hear when the thing was here. The next day during dinner, joined by my father, I recited the event, but my mom, till this day, refused to talk about it. I have grown up fascinated by how vast and enigmatic the universe is, so true and physical, but that thing held me back, making me question my atheist belief every now and then. I fly helicopters for a living. I was working on a power line one year, and was going back to our landing zone when I noticed an opening in the trees to what appeared to be a leg. I came back and tried to get as low as I could into the clearing thinking it was a person. It was a full-grown cow that had been completely skinned. There were no farms around, and the animal didn't appear to be cut up in any way. I went back to the landing zone, picked up one of my ground crew members, and flew back with him just so he could verify that I wasn't crazy. On the flight back, we were both kind of in awe, because we have no idea how that animal got to where it's at, even more so that it had no skin on its entire body. It looked like a perfect cow without skin. Imagine the situation, me, 13-years-old girl, walking with my dog in fresh snow, really fresh 5 centimeters deep snow. There was no one around. I see a really big black dog. I look at my dog. He is terrified and trying to get home. We run home. I wait for 10 minutes and go back to check that dog. There are no dog footprints, none at all, on fresh snow, only footprints of me and my dog. I checked all area, and nope, nothing. It wasn't a hallucination. My dog nearly peed itself when he saw that black giant dog. I was visiting home, and my mom, my dad, and I decided to go to my maternal grandfather's grave to pay our respects. We have a tradition where for the first 10 years after a person's death, a cross must stay over their grave, otherwise the person might have a hard time crossing to whatever place comes after you die. He's been dead for 7 years, so my dad checked that the cross was sturdy and didn't need to be propped up or anything. We all checked it. It was definitely not going anywhere. About a week later, we had a windstorm, and after that, I started waking up in the middle of the night because I felt like someone was shaking me awake. This kept up for almost 2 weeks before I had a dream that my grandfather was sitting on the edge of my bed, and he asked me to go to his grave and fix the cross because it had fallen. I told my parents about this, and we all had a laugh about it. The dreams kept up though, at a disconcerting frequency, because I was starting to be exhausted all the time from a lack of sleep. My dad and I, on a whim, went back to my grandfather's grave. Lo and behold, the cross had been knocked down. Gatekeepers said it probably got knocked down in the storm. We picked it up and I stopped seeing my grandfather in my dreams. A few years ago, I was staying in Alabama with a friend. One day, I was driving down a steep road in the rain and fog. It wasn't quite night yet, but it was getting dark. Within the blink of an eye, there was a little girl on the side of the road, walking towards my car, and I thought I was about to hit her head on, and then she disappeared. I panicked and turned around, but there was no one. I'll never forget it, because my brain just can't make sense of it.